So I've gotten a couple of emails from some of you who are a little confused as to where to start with this new coding challenge, the coding challenge that asks you to create the scenes for a text-based RPG. And so I wanted to do a little bit of a tutorial video on this because I think there are some concepts in this challenge that will be helpful for you as you're looking at coding more complicated things later. So this is one approach to this problem. This may not be the approach that you end up taking, but maybe this will help you as you go. So right now I'm in Replit. Make sure that you're in a Replit for Python 2.7.10. If you are in the class Replit, that should be the one that's up for you. And I've already created the program, and I'm just going to be pasting the lines back in for the program so that, and explaining what I wrote as I wrote it, so that we can do this more quickly and I don't have to be typing as I'm talking to you. So things will come up relatively fast, but that's the way it is. If you need to pause the video, feel free to do so. So the first thing we do is we start with our game loop. And the game loop is an important thing for a lot of games because what it basically does is it says, keep this thing going and run this function until the game is over. And so we're going to start with a while loop. Sorry about that. We're going to start with a while loop. All right, hold on. I screwed up. We're going to start by declaring a variable. And this variable is a variable that we're going to call current scene. This is going to keep track of the scene that our hero is in. And then we're going to put this outside of our while loop so that it's not affected by any of the things that are going on within the loop. And then we're going to create a while loop. And we're going to say while current scene is greater than or equal to 0, do this. Now what a while loop does is it's going to keep going through the code that's within the loop as long as the condition set for the loop, which in this case is current scene greater than or equal to 0, is happening. So right now our current scene is 0. This means that we'll start working our way through this loop. And so once we're in this while loop, we're going to start describing our scenes. And so first we're going to say if the current scene is 0. Now notice our current scene is 0, so this is going to be the starting scene for our RPG. If the current scene is 0, then we're going to print a message to the user. In this case we'll print, you find yourself in a meadow. There's a path to your south and to your north. So we're printing this to the user, and what we want to then do is grab the user's input. And as you've done in most of your other text games so far, you grab your user's input with raw input. Now we're going to ask the user, what do you do? And we're going to store that in a variable that we're going to call user_input. So when this appears on the screen, it'll appear with a prompt that says to the user, what do you do? And then the user will type in a command that will then be interpreted by our statement here. So what could the user type in? Well, in our case here, we have two paths that we want the user to be able to take. The user can either go north or go south. So if the user inputs go north, then we want to change our current scene to another scene. And so we're going to call that scene 1. And then we have an elif statement. Elif the user input is go south, we change the current scene to scene 2. So what's going to happen here is we're going to link our scenes by using their numerical signifier. And this is really the end of this if statement. So we're in our while loop and it's looping through. Right now our current scene is 1. Right now our current scene is 0. If our current scene is equal to 0, we print this out, we get the user's input. The user inputs go north. Now our current scene variable is changed to 1. When our while loop starts up again and our current scene is 1, we're going to need a new if statement. And that if statement is going to say this, elif current scene equals 1. Now remember also that whenever you're doing testing for equivalence with an if or an elif statement that you're using a double equal sign. You use a single equal sign in order to assign a value to a variable. You use a double equal sign in order to test for equivalence. So elif current scene is equivalent to 1. Then we print there's a river here. There's a path to the south. that's the path that we just came from, and to the east. Then we once again ask the user for their input. It's the same statement that we used on line 6, user input equals raw input, what do you do? And our user is going to have options for their input. We're expecting, since there's a path to the south and a path to the east, that the user will input either go south or go east. If the user inputs go south, then we're going to go back to scene 1 because the user's going back to the meadow. So if the user inputs go south, our current scene is equivalent to 0, and then we're going to jump into this while loop again. If the current scene is 0, then we will basically run through our first if statement again. If the user input says go east, our current scene will become 3 because we already have to deal with our go south condition from our first if statement. So east is going to be a third scene, sorry, in this case, a fourth scene that we're going to deal with. Okay, now we're going to build out the rest of the scenes in a very similar way. So we're going to go to scene 2. Scene 2 is south of the meadow. And in scene 2, we're going to print that we come to a cave and there's a light flickering inside the cave, and then we remind the user that there's a path to the north that they have just come in on. We ask the user for what they do. We check to see if the user says they go into cave, then we need a scene for the cave, and we're going to set that to scene 4. If the user says go north, that user's back in the meadow, and so they go back to scene 0. We then go to scene 3. Remember, that's the one that's east of the river. So if we go to the east of the river, we find ourselves at a dead end. The path that you came from is to the west. If we ask for the user's input. If the user inputs go west, then they go back to the first scene to the river. And so we have one more scene that we need to deal with. That's scene 4. Scene 4 is the interior of the cave. You enter the cave and it is filled with treasure. Now remember, in this project, we're only asking the user which direction to go. In a later project, we might want to handle the user saying to us that they want to take the treasure. So we say, what do you do? And we handle go out. And if the user goes out of the cave, then you remember they're back in scene 2, and it'll print out that statement again. Okay, so the user, now we have links between all of our scenes. None of our scenes is left unlinked with any other scene. And basically, we've got an entire 5-scene setting for our game right here, including a meadow, a river, a cave, an interior of the cave, and a dead end. Now, one of the things that I think is helpful with a game like this is to give some prompts to the user if the user is putting something in that doesn't make any sense, and to handle some of our errors. If the user puts something in that is something other than go north or go south, then our if and elif statements aren't going to handle that. So we need to handle every other use case. And the way that you handle every other use case is by using an else statement. So we use this else statement, and the thing that I'm doing if the user puts in something other than go north or go south on our scene 0 is I'm giving them a hint. I'm saying you can either go north or you can go south in quotation marks so that they know to type this in. I'm going to use that same kind of else statement in all of the scenes to give the user a couple of hints. And that's pretty much the game. So now, that was a mistake there. Here, I'm going to redo that here. So we redo my else. All right, print, you can go out. Okay, so now let's imagine that let's start the game. It says you find yourself in a meadow. There's a path to your south and to your north. What do you do? I'm going to go north. There's a river here. There's a path to the south and to the east. Let's go south again. Let's go back where we were. Hey, we find ourselves back in the meadow. There's a path to the south and to the north. What do you do? I'm going to go south. I come to a cave. There's a light flickering inside the cave. There's a path to the north. I'm going to go in. Oh, wait a minute. I can either go in cave or go north. Remember, that's my else statement coming up to prompt me. So instead, I go in cave. I enter the cave and it's filled with treasure. So this is a very simple 5-scene RPG. This is probably as simple as we're going to make it here. In future projects for this project, we're going to start adding some things like character classes, item classes, and monster classes that will help to make this RPG a little bit more interesting. We're even going to add a method for battling monsters later on that uses a little bit of math and some statistics and things like that. So we'll be playing around with that in a future episode. But this is at least a good beginning. Hopefully this is helpful. Thanks for watching. Have a nice day.